Alright, Demos, you there?
I am indeed. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Perfect.
I shot your message there.
Oh, there you go. What's the bit of drama?
We're live.
Oh, gotcha. We are live, waiting to get the next game up on the screen here, and that will be our finals for the day. So we know we have an Iyslander. Now it's just a matter of, I believe, whether we're seeing a Bravo or an Oldhim on the other side of the table. And here we are. We have Matthew versus Michael, another Iyslander Oldhim matchup. So we've seen Michael on stream many times before today. I believe this is Matthew's first time on stream today. And this is our grand finals. Let's see how it shakes out. Michael once again opting for that Crown of Providence over the Cornet's Peak. I don't know if we've actually seen Crown of Providence get used for its ability to sync a card yet from Michael. We have definitely seen an instance where Cornet's Peak may have been beneficial, but who's to question the player who's made it into finals? Matthew running no room 2, it's looking like here, boots and gloves, as well as possibly a third point of prevention off of Crown of Seeds. So we're opting for a bit more Arcane Barrier and a bit less armor than the very aggressive strategy used by Tarek last round. A very solid opening, pitching Heart of Fyendel to play out a Frost Hex to start the game. So even if Michael isn't going for that very long-term endgame plan, which I doubt he would be based on what we've seen on stream so far, that Frost Hex may come up with a surprising amount of damage just from spare Frostbites left at the end of turns on plays such as this where big glacial footsteps are coming down and you might play that, Aether Hail out of Arsenal. And it just does one extra arcane damage. But instead, we are taking a little bit. We're blocking with 2 cards. We're taking a little bit of damage, and we're playing a Wounded Bull in return. Michael, sit on that Arsenal card. It may have not been worth the life that blocking with those other 2 cards was. Or maybe it's just a sink below that we're saving for a slightly better time when there's a card that we actively want to put into Arsenal. Um, But we're seeing Matt block out the full mount and then swing back with just a hammer for 4. Michael opting to block 3 with a Frost Hex and take a Frostbite. Now, we can just use the Tunic to go right through that Frostbite if we are looking to play out an Aether Ice Vein this turn. Which it does appear that we are doing, using it with, it's looking like a Cold Snap? Can't quite tell with that glare. You're trying to figure out how much arcane damage is with blocking here versus the threat of the discard. So pitching a blue, which isn't very surprising. We are blocking 2 of it as much as we can as possible, and then pitching in City's Chill afterwards, presumably knowing that the follow-up here is going to be another pitching Waning Moon to swing. But seeing that it would have been overwhelmingly blocked, Michael just opts to Arsenal instead. I think an interesting option there, because I believe there was an Enlightened Strike in that play, could have been just coming in with Enlightened Strike for 7 damage, foregoing the Arsenal, and punishing Matthew's overpitch there. But that's not what we're seeing here. We are instead seeing that Cold Snap did make it into Arsenal. So we are threatening to freeze the Arsenal, which may be particularly relevant if this is, maybe Matthew, maybe it's a pummel, maybe that might be the play that's coming out here. Probably not the play you want to be making. You might just want to pitch that blue, block the Arcane instead. But either way, yeah, so it looks like Cold Snap is not being paid through. We are paying to block 2 of the damage off of Waning Moon. Michael does, however, still have a 4-card hand, since that Cold Snap did let him draw 1 card. Debating on blocks here. There's no Tunic counter this time to work through that Frostbite in the very easy way that happened last turn. Looking like we're considering committing 2 cards here. Possibly 1 card and a piece of armor. There we are. There goes the Crown of Providence. And we're seeing it actually sink a card. So we're seeing, I believe, a Hypothermia go to the bottom of the deck. And then one of those floating resources used to pay for the Frost Hex's arcane damage from the effect of that Frostbite. So Enlightened Strike for 7 damage, it looks like. And then Michael's going to be presumably popping that last card into the arsenal. It looked like an Aether Hail, not 100% sure on that one. But if it is, that's always a good value card to have. 5 damage off of a blue pitch. Yeah. Matthew throwing the armor at the physical attack while he's got the chance to. And blocking with the Endless Winter. So maybe there's a couple of spare reds in the hand here. Both these life totals are very high. It is unlike the game to be much more aggressive back and forth, swinging and taking damage that we saw with Tarek and Michael's game very recently. We have Command and Conquer coming in, so easy instant speed play out of the arsenal. There's the Frostbite already. If you want to pummel it, it will be a little bit more awkward, which will allow this arcane damage to push through just that little bit much more. Well, before that Frostbite lands, we are using the Tunic to generate a resource. And that's allowing a little bit more arcane damage prevention. And, oh, we're actually working through the Frostbite through that process. Using the remaining resources to use Waning Moon and try to get that last bit of information from Matthew. Yeah, so he wants to hold on to that 2 floating. We are really threatening that pummel, which is hard to play around at this point. Yeah, you block 1 card, know you're going to be taking a lot of damage, and then discard 1 more so you can arsenal and move along. That's what looks like is happening. It is a lot of damage, though. Michael resetting with that arsenal. Tunic ticking up to 2, it looks like. Coming in. Endless Winter, no fuse on that one again. So it is 8 damage. Or sorry, the last non-fuse Endless Winter we saw was actually last game. Was that a Sink Below that came out of Arsenal there? That's what it looked like. So we've taken 1 damage. So the on-hit effect of Endless Winter, where we create a Frostbite on the activation of an ability, is active. It's not going to be relevant this turn, as Bindle's Fighting Spirit is a card, not an activated ability. So we're gaining 1 life and threatening 7 damage. We see a very conservative 2-card block with the last Endless Winter out of Matthew's deck, taking 1 damage. And we are seeing that much slower pace of play in this instance. And while there is 1 Frost Hex on the board, I believe Michael did block with 1 earlier. So that inevitability may not quite be there. Here we're seeing Command and Conquer come out. Tunic isn't at 3 counters yet. Easy block with 2 cards, trade it back and forth. Michael's turn, we are playing the Wounded... Oh, sorry, another Final Fighting Spirit out of Arsenal. Just these very efficient plays, Matthew played out 2 cards last turn, pitched 1 to play Command and Conquer, threatening 6 damage, easily blocked by Michael. Last turn, Michael played Final Fighting Spirit, gained 1 life, pushed 1 life through after Matthew blocked with 2 cards. Now that's what's happening again this turn, which just goes to show the very strong value engine of this particular version of the Iyslander deck that is now the standard, where these 2-card plays that you're making are 8 damage, or at least representing 8 points of value. So 7 damage and gaining a life, or in the case of Wounded Bull, 7 damage and then dealing 1 extra to be 8. So it was quite a wide gulf in life points after that Command and Conquer play, followed by the pummel from Matthew, slowly evening up as Michael is making these very strong value plays. Tunic is now at 3 for Matthew, who's starting the turn with 2 cards in hand. And we are seeing Enlighten Strike for... Oh, we've got the Snap Emirata Scolding. So we're dealing damage. Matthew's thinking whether this card is worth... Oh, Oasis Respite. That would explain why Matthew seems to be content playing this much slower game. So that damage that just got ticked down there came from an instant speed Waning Moon. Michael taking 2 damage, and 2 cards left, and that is, I believe, a Wounded Bull. So again, these very strong value plays. I find it interesting that Matthew chose to use the Tunic counter on the Oasis Respite immediately rather than put it into an empty arsenal and save it for perhaps an Aether Ice Vein or something slightly more threatening. That being said, by using it instantly, you can start ticking that Tunic back up again. Maybe it does end up making the difference for that being an extra point of value, an extra life you can save for Arcane Barrier later in the game. Michael thinking about how to block this hammer, which is a very good play in this instance. Michael doesn't have any armor that he's happy throwing at this, and doesn't have a Tunic counter, so can't even pay for those Ironhide gauntlets to cover it for him as well. So this one play does quite handily shut off a potential Aether Ice Vein coming back while still allowing Michael to block out. So if Michael does want to make that an Aether Ice Vein play, he'd be taking 4 damage for the privilege of doing so. The alternative is, of course, losing the Tunic wholesale. But instead, we are taking 1 damage, getting a Frostbite, and Michael has 3 turns to swing, or 3 cards with to swing back on his own turn. So we are paying 1 to play Amulet of Ice, which still leaves the 2 floating for Waning Moon, making the best of a bad situation in that. Having an Amulet of Ice is just such a strong disruptive tool because you can use it whenever you would like, assuming you've Ice Fused on the turn. But so long as you Ice Fuse, you can use it at any point. You can get tons of information out from your opponent. Matthew running the Heart of Findel in his deck that he just drew into, it looks like. Choosing to pitch for Crown of Seeds as part of blocking that arcane damage. So, 4-card hand. We'll see what he swings back with after what was quite a light response from Michael. So we are over pitching for the hammer. And I would be surprised if this was threatening a Frostbite, because there aren't very many red cards in the deck that do threaten a Frostbite. But it was worked out quite conveniently that there was a sink below there. Is this worth pummeling? It looks like Matthew is asking himself. It appears to be. And there's the second sink below. followed by an insidious chill that will create a frostbite, and that frostbite will deal 1 damage from Frost Hex because there were 0 resources remaining. If both players remembered to do so, or perhaps they quickly ticked it down and I just missed it. But now, these life totals are quite equal, and Michael has 2 very powerful disruptive permanents on the board. So the game, the amount of counting that both of these players have to do on a turn-to-turn basis has increased significantly. Because now everybody constantly needs to work around, well, could I force a discard? Well, could I be forced to discard in this scenario? We are blocking as much damage from Ice Bolt and Waning Moon as we can here. The Tunic counter once again being used to Waning Moon. And once again, it looks like that Frostbite is going to be providing a significant amount of, or that Frost Hex is going to be providing value by that Frostbite pinging Matthew for 1 damage left when he's got 0 resources floating. Now the question is, how much damage does Michael want to take? And it looks like we're blocking 3 damage and taking 7. So what is Michael's 2-card hand? Is it another Amulet of Ice, or is it going to be a big attack? It is a big attack. That is another Wounding Bull for 8. Michael has really managed to play out almost all of these so far. This is, I believe, the second Wounded Bull we've seen. We've seen both those. We've seen 2 Finals Fighting Spirits. And Iyslander is always happiest when she is playing those cards out rather than being forced to block with them in awkward scenarios. So the downside here is that Michael will not have an arsenal, which perhaps Matthew can take advantage of, but that's looking unlikely as we're blocking with 2 cards and there's not much meaningful disruption Oldhim can offer with 2 cards. So we're just seeing a hammer for 4 with no additional effect. We're going to be putting a card into arsenal. It might be something offensive. It could be something defensive. It could be an Oasis Respite, which would be a good thing to get into arsenal at this point in the game, as it can be quite handy at dealing with some of the surprise damage as we get closer and closer into Storm Strider's territory as well. But we're blocking 3 with Aether Icebane, taking 1 damage, no Frost on hit, and Fyendal's Fighting Spirit coming back. So now we've seen 5 of those big 6 attacks coming through and just, really helping with the value that this deck poses on hands of any size. Matthew thinking on his blocks here, possibly thinking that maybe a different strategy may be necessary rather than trading the 2 cards back and forth. As we've seen the 2 cards going back and forth, the value that Michael's been able to show, even after taking that off turn of Amulet of Ice, swinging, Waning Moon, is still very much catching up to what was a wider gulf in life totals. And now we've got quite narrow in difference of life totals. Matthew only has 2 cards in hand for the turn, and Michael has an arsenal. Matthew does as well, but Iyslander makes much better use of arsenals than any other hero in the game. So we're seeing Enlightened Strike for 7 here. Are we going to keep seeing 2-card blocks getting traded? Another Amulet of Ice. So that will also represent an arcane damage coming through on that Frostbite. And then the question becomes, is it worth it for Michael to pitch a card to deal that 3 arcane damage with Waning Moon? Do you take an additional 3 damage in order to deal an additional 3 damage with that? I think if I'm Michael, I'm leaning towards yes, on the basis that you have such powerful disruption on the board that, if you're fusing an Aether Ice Vein here, it doesn't matter if the damage is blocked because, yeah, there we are. It doesn't matter if the damage is blocked because you can strip as many cards out of this hand as you would like. You have Insidious Chill that's going to be triggered no matter what, and then you can choose if and when to use your Amulets of Ice based on how much it looks like Matthew wants to hold on to those remaining cards. So we're paying through Insidious Chill. Now thinking on how much arcane damage to block from Aether Ice Vein. So it looks like we're going to try to block as much as possible here, so that 1 resource that was remaining goes to preventing damage from Crown of Seeds. And we're pitching again to presumably block 2 more from the Null Rune. So this is preventing a total of 3 damage, which pushes 1 through. That still needs to be paid for. 2 resources floating, so is it, oh, interesting, that the 2 resources were used to block Waning Moon damage, which gave a very good window for Michael to pop that Amulet of Ice. And is the other one coming down to strip the very last card out of Matthew's hand? It is indeed. So Matthew with no turn at all, and this could be a lot of damage prevented. Oh, it looks like he's drawing up. I'm not sure. Okay, so it looks like Michael doesn't have interest in pushing arcane damage on Matthew's turn. It's rare to see a wizard do that when they have the option to on an opposing empty hand.
You know what is interesting is that I kind of feel like, yeah, he got cards out of his hand, but what did he do with it?
That is a good question.
Because
I mean,
effectively he just made him not have a turn, but he didn't do anything to him. This is a totally different thing right here.
Yeah, well, you stole a lot of tempo, you reset the Amulet of Ice. There is no arsenal, so now these blue Aether Ice Veins can't
That's true. Yeah,
be
no
stopped.
arsenal.
It was very much that tempo grab. And now we can see some of this damage come back through.
Okay, you know what? Let me take that back because I was definitely wrong. Because having that card in the arsenal and just drawing up his hand, the opponent draws his hand, he can throw the 3 arcane to him, 1 hits, and then he can effectively now make him lose his hand or lose a good chunk of it. He pitched. What did he pitch to do?
So he pitched to pay for
Oh,
Insidious Chill.
no. I mean
Yeah.
his opponent, the uh, Dilks paid. Oh, he paid to throw
He
one
he
down,
paid.
so you can. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
he paid 2 resources because Insidious Chill triggered.
And then
So
that's a blue, right? That's a blue, and then he's gonna throw the headpiece. I mean, does he? He doesn't have enough resources to want to break anything at this point, but now he's gonna lose his hand, and that I think that's more important is losing your entire hand. Now he's starting his turn with
it is indeed. And at this point, you know, do you swing the hammer and take? I feel like swinging the hammer is a risky proposition at this
oh,
point.
gaining some life,
Um, what is
throwing this
that?
guy out
That's
here. Give him
Cold Snap. It looks like.
oh wow, it doesn't end. Wait,
Yeah,
so
Cold
did
Snap pitching hard to find out. So that's going to replace itself. You get
oh he
to
did this on
draw a
his own
card.
turn? Oh, that totally changes everything. What happened?
Yeah. That's what happens when you buy that entire turn by triggering those double amulets of ice. What that we saw 2 turn cycles ago. So now that Waning Moon is being swung, um, you know, that card prevents 3 damage, but it also, Matthew still took 1 damage as total in that process. Michael gained 1, and Michael now has a 4 card hand. So we could see another fused Ice
Channel,
Vein.
I like it.
Oh no, instead we're seeing Channel Lake Frigid. So it looks like we didn't draw into the ideal next Aether Ice Vein.
But it's fine because now his opponent's gonna have to pay so much more resources, even to play
Which is,
for his headpiece. Oh, he can pay for his headpiece.
yeah, I mean, it's Channel Lake Frigid is okay, but realistically, it's not going to be doing much more than costing Matthew 1 extra resource on this turn, right? With
Oh, yeah.
3 cards, you're not. Yeah, so your hammer costs 1 more. Um,
If he has aces
so
for
it,
spite,
it, it results in 1 net point of damage. What it does is it does just make it more awkward for Crown to happen next turn.
if he can keep it
Uh,
up. Oh yeah, he will. He should be able to. And he has to survive through this turn. It is an
well,
ice.
so it will be up on Michael's turn.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure.
Regardless. Yeah. So, if your next play is, that Aether Ice Vein, that Crown of Seeds becomes, not efficient to pitch for to save that 1 point of damage. And at
Cool.
these life totals, every single point counts.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
he's got a cold snap in Arsenal.
I believe that's what was put in Arsenal.
Yeah,
So, I
he's gonna
mean,
have a four
Cold Snap,
block in his
great card
hand.
to have in Arsenal because, it's pushing a point of damage and it's replacing itself.
I think maybe I would just take the damage here because he's gonna get 4. He's gonna give him a frostbite. You know he's not gonna pummel because channel's on the board. His next turn he can pitch around the frostbite and get that ice vein out of his hand. Fuse, get rid of a card of his.
Well, it looks like what he's going to do is he's going to activate Cold Snap to freeze that card, draw a card, pay through the Frostbite,
Oh, he's
and then
gonna.
possibly still be able to do that same thing.
Skip ice vein in. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
there you go. Oh, it's not cold
Oh,
snap.
sorry.
Sorry.
It was a Polar Blast, not a Cold Snap.
It's the damage
So
may have been better
actually,
to take. He could even have pitched around it
for
with polar blast. Drew a card.
maybe for the first time all day though, the threat of Polar Blast dominating a card may actually be relevant
Oh,
because
in
if
lightning
this
strike.
is yeah, Enlightened Strike dominated for 7 damage. It's going to be hard for Oldhim to block any more than 3. You're taking 4, you're going to 5. That is a terrifying zone to be in against somebody who's going to have an arsenal and
He pitched for it.
has Stormstrider still online. But it looks like Dominate was paid for because,
7 is
I
7.
mean, at that point, it's reasonable to do so, right? If you have the spare blue, you can pitch a blue. But we're paying 2 to Crown. Interesting.
He wants a thicker hand.
It looks like.
block,
Yeah,
and then take one.
and then
Or no, not even.
uh,
Yeah, take
yeah,
one.
no, take one because Winter's Bite only blocks two. So three off of Autumn's Touch, two off of Winter's Bite, and one from the Crown Prevention, still netting one.
And he has an Aether Ice Vein, so he's going to
Yeah,
be able to poke it through from Arsenal. And there's that hand there. I think he's going to go ahead and pitch. Hmm. He also got okay, so I guess that is not going to be on the board anymore. And he's going to go
so
ahead
there's the
and
blue
use.
Aether Ice Vein, triggering Insidious Chill. This is just going to be a lot of arcane damage, possibly enough for lethal, depending on what's left in that hand. I can't see what it was fused with.
React to
If it
use
was an
this.
Ice Bolt, it might be enough for
Let's use
lethal.
this.
Yeah, that looks like it would be it. There we go.
Okay, wow. Michael is an Iyslander. Will receive a
Indeed.
healthy amount of Living Legends points today. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, I think it's no surprise to see these two characters make their way to the finals. And also, just watching Michael play all day with this deck has been um, very educational in terms of how powerful this character can be.
But both of the Ice Heroes can just do so much with so many cards.
Well, I
I
think we've
mean,
seen plenty of what what
yep,
with Tarek's Oldhim. I think we've seen enough of that. Oh my goodness, I will have nightmares of those pulverized double pulverized turns.
that
Oh,
was a fantastic back-to-back opportunity.
ugh,
But yeah, that was overall, I think, a great pro quest. If not surprising in the final results, I think there were definitely some twists and turns throughout the game that I very much enjoyed watching.
hmm
Um, and congratulations to today's winner, Michael.
definitely. And once
It
again,
was
I'm going to say
certainly
thank you
well
to
earned.
Demos here for taking the time, being all the way in England and hours ahead of us, to sit down and to spit that knowledge of flesh and blood and all of its glory.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Right. Thank you so much, and everyone else, thank you for watching. Take care.